Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today's presentation is about ethical approval and it's a part of a playlist on open science. I hope you watched previous videos on informed consent, GDPR or data management plan. It's complementary to that. Well, the objective of today's presentation is to help you explain the importance of ethical approval and how to prepare for it if you are going to ask for ethical approval at your institution, provide a step-by-step guide to obtaining the ethical approval and focusing on the compliance with international and local regulations to make sure that when you are passing your approval in front of the ethics committee at your institution, you will have an approval in a short time. Well, the contents of today's presentation, I'm going to talk about ethical approval and the frameworks and regulations secondly. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about the process of ethical approval. Number 4, the key components of an ethics application. And 5, and before the end, the challenges and the best practices before some takeaway advices. So let's start with ethical approval, what it is and what it's about. Well, ethical approval is a formal process through which proposed research activities are reviewed to ensure they comply with ethical standards and guidelines. The primary goal is to protect the rights, dignity, safety, well-being and of all participants, whether they are humans or animals, and for sure researchers included, and the broader community involved in the research or affected by the research. So this is overall. For sure, ethical approval is requested in many universities when you are conducting observational research or experimental research or qualitative research, and you will need to have an approval from this ethics committee. So for legal reasons to be allowed to do the study, they even maybe assign you sometimes a code or a number that you can only use to prove that the university is giving the consent on your research. So you need to go through this process to be also safe from a legal point of view so that you're not later accused. And maybe if you are publishing in a journal, you will also require that you have an ethical approval number of your institution to make sure that somebody looked at what you're doing and approved it. Now, it's very important also in the publications. This is a form that we always see in most of the journals, that we need to have a kind of statement on the ethical review committee. And here, for example, it's written that manuscripts involving humans or human data must be accompanied by a copy of letter from your ethical committee approving your study. Alternatively, if no ethical committee approval was needed, please complete and sign the below and submit with your manuscript. So today in many journals we will find this ethical review committee, and sometimes it needs to be signed by your university, and you need to have a manuscript title, a corresponding author, and on the other side you need to have the signature from your ethical approval in university. So this is also important. So it's not only the legal side, but it's also for publication. Now, why do we need ethical approval in general? First of all, because it ensures the trust, it builds public confidence in academic research, it avoids any breaches and any scandals related to bad practices of researchers, it protects the institutions themselves, shields the university from legal or reputation risk. Let's say a researcher went off norm and started to practice some things that are not ethically correct. By that, the institution also from their side can protect themselves. Also, and number 3, it promotes responsibility, so it encourages the researchers to consider ethical implications in their work and reflect on the impact of their work and the influence on society. And in this sense, I advise you to watch a video about research ethics to get deeper information and insights about this theme. Now, what are the ethical frameworks and regulations that are there when it comes to ethical approval? Well, like I mentioned earlier before in a GDPR video, I invite you to watch it, that there are different types of information that needs to be protected. And depending on the country and the region you are living in, for example, in Europe, the Europeans will be falling under the GDPR. The GDPR, for example, it's a general rule for personal data protection in the European Union. It protects people from their location, the IP addresses, sexual orientation, religious belief, date of birth, phone numbers, address names, and so on, online identifiers. So you can see here that there's a range of parameters and input information that will be protected, and therefore when you ask for ethical approval, one of the things will be how are you going to handle this sensitive information? Are you going to anonymize them or pseudo-anonymize them? How to make sure that they are secure, stored well, there is no risk of breach these data. And also when it comes to animal, the same applies. If you are going to use animals, what are the practices you are going to do? Can you avoid the animals? How much animals will be used in the experiment? The necessity, and here the ethical approval committee will interfere and make sure that you are only using them when it's urgently or unavoidably usable. And I mentioned that before in the video of ethical principles. So now the ethical approval process, after that you have the idea about what information that needs to be protected, how can I prepare ahead? First of all, you need to look at international standards. Like the Declaration of Helsinki, which is very famous in medical research, the Belmont Report, which is very famous in human research in general. You need to be aware about these international standards. Also, when you look at regional standards, for example, in Europe, you have the GDPR, which is a compliance of data privacy regulation, the ethical requirements for the Horizon Europe research funding, some certain funding calls, they have their own internal ethical requirements, so you need to be also aware about it, and you have to look at synchronizing your submission with your ethical committee at your university, because they will need to be aligned. Also, there's sometimes institution policies in certain universities, for example, in KU Leuven, Katholische Universiteit van Leuven, for example, in Flanders or in Belgium, the roles of university social and societal ethics committees, SMEC, is very famous there. They take in charge anything that has to do with humans from a qualitative point of view or even observational. They have also requirements for ethical approval for all research involving humans, participant, biological samples or data in general. So this is an example that we can see that there are regulations on the international level. There could be also regulation on a regional level or national level, and then there's even regulation on the institutional level, and there's even sometimes requirement on the call type. So it's important to be aware about it, and you need to know what would be the process in case you are going to submit a proposal. You need to know, okay, what is the time it requires, and what are the background information, and what are the compliance requirements. Now let's go into detail and talk more about the process of ethical approval and what should be done and how can I prepare for this. Well, first of all, you need to have a preparing of your proposal. You need to define your research objectives and your methods. Who will be your participants, how your recruitment, what will be your strategy for recruitment. Anticipate also all these ethical issues. Is there a risk? Do I need to have approvals? Secondly, you need to start to drafting your documents to see if you will have a PIS or a participant information sheet, if you need to have an ICF, informed consent form, what will be your DMP or your data management plan, especially for the GDPR compliance. And there is sufficient videos, I invite you to watch them, the informed consent, the GDPR and the data management plan videos. They are previously available on my playlist. Don't hesitate to watch them. And then the step number 3 is to submit your application and use the university online ethical portal. For example, in some universities it's online, in some universities per email, some university takes shorter, it's more automated, some university takes a long time. So you need to make sure that you are submitting the application in parallel to these institutions, and then from there you can have or share all your required information answering the ethics related questions. So those are the key 3 steps. Still we'll go to step number 4. Step number 4 is to responding to the feedback, because most probably you will have reviewers that will start to ask more additional information for clarity, or they will give some recommendations for changing what you are doing, modification. So here you need to address the reviewer comments and resubmit your ethical plan, for example, your informed consent and so on. And finally, you can receive the approval and starting your research. Don't forget that sometimes you need to do it in parallel while you are submitting for applying for funding. Sometimes you need to have it before. So it depends on your institution. So you need to make sure that this is a process that takes some time. In some university takes in Liège University takes 3 months to get an approval. So it is important to take this into account. And as you can see here, this is a visualization of the ethical approval process for any committee. You must come up first with an plan with detailed information about the data collected and how you ethically will process them. Then you have a privacy notice and consent forms involved, how you will comply with the regulation, GDPR, the participants, and so on. Then you submit your documents for the ethical review at your institution. And finally, you can have the approval after some modification. You can start the study, but don't forget, it's very important and all the time to document your ethical plan and your methodology and the data you are collected, and you have a data management plan always available as appendices, and your consent forms must be also available. This is simply the process for an ethical approval for most of projects. Now let's move to the key component of an ethics application or ethic approval request application. First of all, you will have the components related to the study design. You need to say what are the objectives of my study, methodology, justification. Any risk that is associated with this data collection, so you need to have a simple risk assessment, so you need to identify and mitigate the risks to the participants. You find this also in the data management plan video. You will have privacy measures, how you will assure this privacy, how you will assure the security of the data, how you will anonymize or pseudo-anonymize the data, how participants will be recruited and how they will be approached, and how you assure that their information is safe, stored. And the last point is the consent process. How are you going to get the consent? How they will fully understand what you're doing, how you get them signed, is it digital, is it physical, how you collect the data, how you document this information. So this is also related to the informed consent. I invite you to watch this video. Now we are almost moving to the end of today's presentation, and I want to share with you some challenges and best practices related to the ethical approval requests that we can have in our research. First of all, one of the challenges is the incomplete or unclear documentation. So many researchers don't take the ethical approval seriously, and they fail to do the documentation on a regular basis, tracing what information are collected, how we are having the informed consent, having this information sorted, classified, and so on. Also, some of the challenges is the ambiguities in the data protection plans under GDPR. Let's say you didn't explicitly mention how you will back up your data, how you will store the data, how you make sure that the data will not be let's say shared, or there's a breach in your data security. And what is also happening a lot, and this is a third challenge and most researchers suffer from it, are the delays due to the revisions or insufficient details and the long process of the institutions to give the ethical approval. So those are the risks or the challenges, and I think the most one is from the side of institution is time, and from the side of researchers is the weak documentation or the let's say incomplete application that are not completely providing information about the experiments. So it's very important to look at that and check how you can avoid these delays from the beginning. Try to make your documentation as complete as possible. So the solution here is to use university provided templates. If the university has templates for participant information sheets or informed consent forms, directly ask the university to hand them to you and to use them. Also, you need to contact somebody from the ethical approval committees right away and to talk to them or ask for a meeting, so that you avoid a lot of lost time and directly understand what they are thinking, what they are looking for. Collaborate with the university ethics advisors, like I say, and the data protection officers. Go meet them, go attend if there's training they are offering. Make sure that you get closer to them to understand how they evaluate and what their expectations, so that you get better insights on how they think, and then you can better cater to their expectation or meet their expectation. Follow a checklist of required documents to ensure completeness, the PIS, the ICF, the MP, and so on. Start early to account for potential delay in the approval process, and even if you are uncertain if you get the funding or not, I advise to start the process of requiring the ethical approval, so that you are safe, because it takes time and it doesn't work if you just wait every time and work in a linear way. Well, this is an example. For example, this is an example I wanted to share with you for an application form for the European Union. And you can see here, this is a project we were participating in, and you have a long list of requirements. So this is a list about ethics and security, and here we are asked about, does this activity involve human employment or stem cells? We say no. Does this activity involve the use of human embryos? Does this activity involve humans participants? Does this activity involve interventions like physical, including imaging technology and so on? Does this activity involve human cells and so on and so on? Does this activity involve animals? So I don't know how many questions are those, exceeding 10 or even 20 questions. All are very detailed, asking about what are you going to do? Does the project actively involve in this actions planned, and how the data will be shared? Are there any ethic concerns to be reported, and so on and so on? So it's a very tedious and very long and detailed list, and these are most of the Horizon projects or Marie Curie projects, and you need from the beginning to have a clear idea how to answer these questions, how to be prepared for answering these questions. Sometimes you need to have a PDF file to attach it with the application. Sometimes you need to, once you say yes, you will find an open-ended questionnaire box. You need to fill it in, and this all need to be covered by your ethical approval committee. It's even going to questions like, does this activity deal with endangered fauna and flora protected areas? So here we're not talking about animals, we're not talking about humans, we're talking about nature, how you are going to even assure that you are protecting nature. So it's so important to be aware about the impact of your research and be ready to share this information. Well, this is the end of today's presentation. Some takeaway messages I wanted to share with you when it comes to how to prepare for ethical approval. So ethical approval is not just a formality, it's really a serious work. It involves privacy, security, and you need to start early and seek guidance from your university ethics committee. Get in connection with them as soon as possible and start to inquire, understand the process, and see if they automated the process or it is a manual process, meaning it takes more time. Prioritize transparency, participant safety, and compliance. This must be a priority in all your research endeavors. Use available resources. If there are already templates, if there is already ethics advisors, if there is example for reports, use them to start with so that you don't get lost, and make sure that the quantity of information and the density is already well calibrated. And finally, encourage responsible research as the foundation of academic excellence. If you are, as a scientist, always making sure that you are having your own internal measures of ethical excellence and academic excellence, that this will be part of your academic excellence. So it's not only about compliance, sometimes it's about yourself, that you make sure that from the beginning you have your own principles in your lab, and you make sure always that you respect them, so that when you are asked to report or document, you are already, they are in place, and that you practice them as part of your research activity. Well, this is the end of today's presentation, which is a part of a long playlist on open science. I hope this was useful, and don't hesitate to watch previous videos. The presentation today was about ethical approval and how to apply for ethical approval in your institution. Thank you very much, and good luck with your research.